the island nation of contrasts.
Imagine flying over Japan at sunrise. Snow-covered mountains glowing beneath pink skies. Tiny fishing villages resting beside violent oceans. Dense forests hiding ancient shrines. And then suddenly, Tokyo, a city so massive it almost feels unreal. Millions of people moving beneath giant neon screens. Trains arriving with impossible precision. Vending machines glowing on silent streets at midnight. Japan feels cinematic before you even land, and geography shaped everything about this country. Japan is an island nation stretched across the Pacific Ring of Fire. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, typhoons. Nature constantly threatens destruction here. And maybe that's why Japanese culture became obsessed with discipline, preparation, beauty, and impermanence. Because in Japan, people learned long ago that everything can disappear overnight. Even Mount Fuji, peaceful and beautiful today, is actually a dangerous active volcano. And throughout history, disasters forced Japan to become stronger, more organized, and more resilient than almost any other nation. But Japan's story began long before modern cities and technology, long before anime, long before samurai, back when myths and gods shaped the identity of the islands. The ancient origins of Japan. Long before Japan became a global superpower, ancient clans ruled the islands. Early Japanese society was deeply connected to nature. Forests, mountains, rivers, storms. Everything was believed to contain spiritual power. This belief eventually became Shinto, Japan's native spiritual tradition, a religion filled with sacred shrines, nature spirits, rituals, and ancient mythology. According to legend, Japan's emperors descended directly from the sun goddess Amaterasu. And even today, Japan's imperial family is considered the oldest hereditary monarchy on Earth. Imagine mist moving through ancient cedar. Forests while shrine. Gates stand silently beneath rain. Japan's spiritual atmosphere still feels deeply connected to the ancient world. Over time, China heavily influenced Japan. Writing systems, architecture, Buddhism, philosophy, government systems. Japan absorbed foreign ideas, but transformed them into something uniquely Japanese. And then came the rise of warriors. Powerful military families began competing for control across the islands. Violence spread. Civil wars erupted. And slowly, a new class emerged that would define Japan for centuries. The samurai. Warriors bound by loyalty, discipline, and honor. Men trained from childhood to master the sword. To fear nothing, even death itself. Japan was entering one of the most legendary periods in its history. The Age of the Samurai. For centuries, Japan became a land of war. Powerful clans fought endlessly for control. Castles rose across mountains. Villages burned beneath marching armies. And everywhere, samurai ruled the battlefield. But the samurai were more than soldiers. They lived by a strict code called Bushido, the way of the warrior. Honor, loyalty, discipline, self-sacrifice. A samurai's reputation meant everything. Failure could bring shame worse than death itself. Imagine cinematic shots of armored samurai standing silently beneath falling snow. Katana swords reflecting firelight. War drums echoing across fog-covered valleys. Japan during this era felt both beautiful and brutal. Then came the shoguns, military rulers who controlled Japan while emperors remained mostly symbolic. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan entered a long period of stability. But peace came with isolation. Japan closed itself off from much of the outside world for over 200 years. Foreign influence was restricted. Christianity was banned. Trade was tightly controlled. The country became like a hidden kingdom cut away from the rest of humanity. And during this isolation, Japanese culture evolved into something completely unique. Tea ceremonies became spiritual experiences. Samurai philosophy shaped society. Traditional theater, poetry, gardens, and art flourished. Even silence became part of Japanese beauty. But while Japan remained isolated, the outside world was changing rapidly. And soon, powerful foreign nations would arrive at Japan's shores demanding access. Japan was about to face a choice that would change its destiny forever. The modernization of Japan. In 1853, giant American warships appeared near Japan. Black smoke poured from their engines. Cannons lined their sides. To many Japanese people, the ships looked almost supernatural. The United States demanded Japan open itself to the world, and suddenly, Japan realized something terrifying. It was falling behind. Western powers were industrializing rapidly. Modern weapons, factories, steam engines, global empires. Japan understood that if it stayed weak, it could be conquered. So the country made one of the most shocking transformations in history, the Meiji Restoration. Japan rapidly modernized itself. Samurai culture began disappearing. Railroads spread across the country. Factories rose beside ancient temples. Modern schools, armies, and industries transformed society at incredible speed. Imagine old samurai watching steam trains cut through traditional villages for the first time. An entire civilization changing before people's eyes. And somehow, Japan succeeded. Within decades, it transformed from an isolated feudal society into a modern industrial power. Then Japan shocked the world again. It began defeating major empires, first China, then Russia. For the first time in modern history, an Asian nation defeated a major European power in war. The world was stunned. Japan was no longer weak. It was becoming an empire itself. And with rising power came dangerous ambition. Imperial Japan and World War. By the early 20th century, Japan had become obsessed with expansion. Its military grew stronger. Nationalism intensified. And leaders believed Japan deserved dominance across Asia. The empire expanded into Korea, China, and beyond. But conquest came with horrifying brutality. Entire cities suffered occupation and violence. Millions experienced war, fear, and destruction. And then came World War II. Japan attacked across the Pacific with terrifying speed. Pearl Harbor shocked the United States. Suddenly, the Pacific became one of the deadliest battlefields on Earth. Imagine massive naval battles beneath dark skies, fighter planes screaming across oceans, cities burning in the night. As the war continued, Japan faced overwhelming pressure. Bombings destroyed entire cities. Food shortages spread. And still, the fighting continued until August 1945, a moment humanity would never forget. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In seconds, entire cities disappeared beneath nuclear fire. Blinding light. Shockwaves. Silence. Then unimaginable destruction. The world had entered the nuclear age, and Japan became the first country in history to experience atomic warfare. The emotional scars remain even today. Memorials in Hiroshima still stand as reminders of how devastating human conflict can become. Japan surrendered shortly after. Its empire collapsed. Its cities were shattered. And many believed the country would never recover. But what happened next became one of the greatest recoveries in modern history. Imperial Japan and World War. By the early 20th century, Japan had become obsessed with expansion. Its military grew stronger. Nationalism intensified. And leaders believed Japan deserved dominance across Asia. The empire expanded into Korea, China, and beyond. But conquest came with horrifying brutality. Entire cities suffered occupation and violence. Millions experienced war, fear, and destruction. And then came World War II. Japan attacked across the Pacific with terrifying speed. Pearl Harbor shocked the United States. Suddenly, the Pacific became one of the deadliest battlefields on Earth. Imagine massive naval battles beneath dark skies, fighter planes screaming across oceans, cities burning in the night. As the war continued, Japan faced overwhelming pressure. Bombings destroyed entire cities. Food shortages spread, and still, the fighting continued until August 1945, a moment humanity would never forget. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In seconds, entire cities disappeared beneath nuclear fire. Blinding light, shockwaves, silence. Then unimaginable destruction. The world had entered the nuclear age, and Japan became the first country in history to experience atomic warfare. The emotional scars remain even today. Memorials in Hiroshima still stand as reminders of how devastating human conflict can become. Japan surrendered shortly after. Its empire collapsed. Its cities were shattered, and many believed the country would never recover. But what happened next became one of the greatest recoveries in modern history. Japan's miracle rebirth. When World War II ended, Japan was devastated. Entire cities had become ruins. Factories were destroyed. Millions were homeless. The empire was gone. And after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the country carried emotional scars unlike anything in human history. Many believed Japan would never recover, but they underestimated Japan, because from the ashes of destruction, Japan rebuilt itself with extraordinary speed. Imagine black and white footage slowly transforming into glowing modern skylines. Construction workers rebuilding cities by hand. Factories roaring back to life. Children studying in crowded classrooms while the nation fought to reinvent itself. Japan shifted its focus from war to innovation, technology, industry, education, discipline. And within a few decades, the impossible happened. Japan became one of the richest and most technologically advanced countries on Earth. Japanese products flooded global markets. Cars, cameras, electronics, video games, anime. Suddenly, made in Japan became a symbol of quality and innovation. Tokyo transformed into one of the most futuristic cities in the world. Bullet trains moved at incredible speeds. Neon lights filled entire districts. Robotics and advanced engineering pushed Japan into the future. And yet, despite all this modernization, ancient traditions somehow survived. That's what makes Japan feel almost unreal. A businessman in a perfect suit may still visit a 1,000-year-old shrine before work. Ancient temples stand beside skyscrapers. Robots exist in the same country, where people still bow respectfully during greetings. Japan modernized without fully abandoning its soul, and the world became fascinated by it. Tokyo, the city of the future. Tokyo doesn't feel like a normal city. It feels like another universe. At night, neon signs stretch endlessly across giant buildings. Crowds move through Shibuya Crossing like flowing rivers of light. Arcades glow with music and flashing screens. Tiny ramen shops hide beneath futuristic skyscrapers. And somehow, despite millions of people everywhere, Tokyo often feels strangely quiet. Safe, organized, controlled. Imagine cinematic drone shots over Tokyo at midnight, rain reflecting neon colors across empty streets, trains arriving exactly on time, people sleeping silently on late-night subway rides beneath glowing advertisements. Tokyo became the symbol of modern Japan, a city obsessed with efficiency and innovation. But beneath the futuristic surface, there's another side. Extreme work culture, loneliness, social pressure. Many Japanese workers spend exhausting hours at their jobs. Some people barely see their families. And Japan struggles with isolation in ways outsiders rarely notice. There's even a word for death caused by overwork, karoshi, a reminder that behind Japan's perfection, there can also be deep emotional pressure. Still, Tokyo remains one of the most fascinating cities on Earth, because nowhere else blends future and tradition quite like this. One moment you're inside a robot cafe surrounded by technology, and minutes later, you're standing in complete silence, inside an ancient temple filled with incense smoke. Japan constantly shifts between worlds, and maybe that's why people become obsessed with it. The beauty of traditional Japan. Beyond Tokyo's lights, another Japan still exists. A quieter Japan, a slower Japan. Travel to Kyoto and it feels like time itself begins moving differently. Wooden houses line narrow streets. Temple bells echo through the morning air. Geishas walk silently between traditional tea houses beneath glowing lanterns. During cherry blossom season, the city almost looks unreal. Soft pink petals float through the wind like falling snow. People gather peacefully beneath blooming trees in one of Japan's most beautiful traditions, Hanami, the celebration of temporary beauty. And maybe that tradition perfectly represents Japanese philosophy itself, because Japanese culture deeply values impermanence. The understanding that beauty becomes more precious because it doesn't last forever. You can feel this idea everywhere in Japan, in old temples slowly aging with time, in seasonal festivals, in handwritten poetry, in quiet gardens designed to create peace through simplicity. Then there's Mount Fuji, Japan's most iconic symbol, a volcano rising perfectly above the clouds, sacred, mysterious, powerful. For centuries, artists, monks, and travelers saw Fuji as more than a mountain. It became part of Japan's spiritual identity, and nearby lies one of Japan's darkest mysteries, Aokigahara Forest, often called the suicide forest. Dense trees block sound so deeply, the forest can feel unnaturally silent. Legends, fear, and tragedy surround the area even today. Japan's beauty often carries hidden sadness beneath it. And maybe that emotional contrast is exactly what makes the country unforgettable. The dark side of Japan. To the outside world, Japan often looks perfect. Clean streets, polite people, advanced technology, safety, discipline. But beneath that peaceful image, Japan hides struggles many people never see. Loneliness has become one of the country's biggest silent crises. Some people isolate themselves from society for years. They rarely leave their rooms, rarely speak to anyone. In Japan, this phenomenon became so common that it even has a name, hikikomori. And in massive cities filled with millions of people, many still feel completely alone. Japan also faces one of the world's lowest birth rates. Entire villages are slowly disappearing as populations age. Abandoned homes sit empty across the countryside. Some towns feel frozen in time, like ghosts of another generation. Imagine empty train stations surrounded by fog, silent classrooms with no students, old grandparents living alone in forgotten villages beneath the mountains. Modern? Japan is fighting a demographic crisis that could reshape the country forever. And then there's the pressure. Japanese society often values perfection, discipline, and social harmony. But maintaining that image can become emotionally exhausting. Many people hide stress behind polite smiles. Even success can come with sacrifice. Yet despite all these challenges, Japan continues moving forward. Quietly, patiently, enduring hardship the same way it always has, with resilience. Because resilience may be the most important part of Japanese identity. a country constantly rebuilding itself after disaster. Again and again. Anime, technology, and global culture. Few countries have influenced global pop culture like Japan. Anime, manga, video games. Technology, fashion. Japanese creativity spread across the world in ways nobody expected. What once seemed strange or niche became global obsession. Today, millions grow up watching Japanese anime. Series created in Japan shaped entire generations worldwide. And places like Akihabara in Tokyo feel like giant futuristic playgrounds for gaming and anime culture. Neon lights, arcades, cosplayers, electronic stores stacked floor after floor. Walking there at night almost feels like entering a science fiction movie. Japan also revolutionized gaming forever. Nintendo, PlayStation, arcade culture. Japanese companies helped define modern entertainment itself. And while Japan became famous for advanced technology, the country never lost its artistic soul. Japanese design focuses heavily on simplicity, detail, and emotion. Even ordinary things, packaging, gardens, train stations, meals often feel carefully designed. There's beauty and precision here. And perhaps that's why the world became obsessed with Japan. Because Japan doesn't just create products, it creates experiences. Experiences that feel thoughtful, emotional, memorable, and deeply human. The most beautiful places in Japan. Japan's landscapes often feel unreal, especially during cherry blossom season. Entire cities turn pink beneath blooming sakura trees. Petals drift slowly through the wind like scenes from a dream. Then there's Kyoto. Temples hidden among forests. Golden shrines reflecting across still water. Bamboo forests swaying silently beneath sunlight. At night, old lantern streets glow softly while rain falls across stone pathways. Few places on Earth feel more cinematic. Travel north to Hokkaido, and Japan transforms again. Snow-covered mountains stretch endlessly beneath icy skies. Hot springs steam beside frozen forests. The region feels peaceful, wild, and almost untouched. Meanwhile, Okinawa feels completely different. Tropical beaches, blue oceans, island culture influenced by centuries of trade and history. Some parts of Japan feel futuristic. Others feel ancient. And that constant contrast is what makes the country unforgettable. Even ordinary moments feel cinematic here. A train moving through snowy countryside. A quiet shrine hidden between skyscrapers. A lone ramen shop glowing late at night. Japan turns small moments into emotional memories. And maybe that's the real reason the world remains fascinated by Japan. Not just because of technology, not just because of anime, not even because of its beauty, but because Japan feels deeply human, a country shaped by disaster, but never destroyed by it, a nation balancing tradition and progress every single day, ancient temples standing beside neon towers, silence existing beside chaos, beauty existing beside sadness. Japan survived earthquakes, war, collapse, atomic destruction, and isolation. And somehow, it transformed all of that pain into culture, discipline, art, and innovation. That's why Japan doesn't feel like just another destination. It feels like another world, a place where the future and the past walk side by side, where every train station, temple, alleyway, and mountain carries emotion, and where even silence seems meaningful. Maybe that's why people visit Japan once and spend the rest of their lives wanting to return. Because Japan is not just a country, it's a feeling, one that stays with you long after you leave.